Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, is among the most recognizable weapons in all of comic book history. But what if Mjolnir was created out of a completely different material? Like, I don't know, adamantium?
Oh, please be my guest.
That would be insane, right, Iron Man? Right? Right?
Mother, I can explain.
In the Marvel comic, Iron Man number 25, Mjolnir has gone missing. That doesn't bode well for the God of Thunder, but Tony Stark believes he has a solution to the problem, because what billionaire, genius, playboy, philanthropist wouldn't? Tony finds Thor in Jotunheim after discovering Thor's distress call. Upon arriving and finding Thor, Iron Man and the rest of us learn that Mjolnir has gone missing. Instead of going on a whodunit mystery adventure, Tony offers up a logical solution. Like any sane person, he recommends that they melt down Wolverine's adamantium bones and make a new hammer. I'm sorry, does Iron Man not know who Wolverine is?
Tell me his name again.
Knowing Iron Man, he was probably being witty, but he does offer the solution of melting down Wolverine's adamantium bones, add in a little vibranium, and steal some material from Reed Richards' lab. Sounds like making Mjolnir out of adamantium would be like baking a cake when it's proposed in that fashion. Smelting this kind of weapon would make this new Mjolnir similar to Captain America's shield, which is made out of similar elements called proto-adamantium. We all know how powerful Cap's shield is, as it is utilized as both an offensive and defensive weapon, so we can only imagine what Mjolnir could do in the hands of Thor if it were made out of similar material. At the end of the day, Thor declines the offer to try and melt down Wolverine, which is probably the smart and safer choice. It's also the best decision if you like where your limbs currently are, you know, attached to your torso. Would this even be a good idea for the God of Thunder? Well, like anyone that faces a major decision, it's time to make a good old-fashioned pros and cons list.
I'll put it on the list.
It's the only logical solution to this hypothetical problem. Where should we start? Pros first? I agree. The good news should always come first, and if you don't agree with that, then I guess that's fine. The first and best pro is that it would be new and shiny. If Thor is anything like us regular people, our brains get all tickled over new and shiny things. Thor does have a history of loving his vices, and new toys are a vice for most of us. The hammer would twinkle and glisten right before knocking the enemy's teeth out. New stuff is the best stuff, and sure, Thor would be sad that the OG Mjolnir is gone, but if corporate America has taught me anything, it's that anyone, and in this case anything, is replaceable. Thor very quickly replaced Mjolnir with Stormbreaker in the MCU, and sure, that was more out of absolute necessity, but wasn't it established that he didn't need his hammer to channel his powers? One could argue that Thor was simply itching to stimulate the reward section of his brain. Such a primitive god. The second pro would be what if Thor found the OG Mjolnir while in possession of the adamantium Mjolnir? Could you imagine Thor literally dual-wielding Mjolnirs? The ruthless combinations that he could land on his enemies would be like watching a masterclass in Tekken. Never let your opponent touch the ground, Thor. I can see him smashing the two hammers together to create a violent spark of electricity that would temporarily blind and deafen his opponent like an ungodly flashbang. He could even toss the enemy the enchanted Mjolnir so that when they catch it, they would instantly fall to the ground, and the adamantium Mjolnir could crush them. The little switcheroos would be hilarious, and the new creative ways Thor would dispose of his enemies would be something to see. How do you think a dual-wielding Thor would approach combat? I mean, the possibilities are endless. The third and final pro to the adamantium Mjolnir would depend on which form of adamantium we are discussing. If Iron Man was able to recreate proto-adamantium, which has been impossible so far and all attempts have only produced what is called primary adamantium, then it would be a no-brainer that adamantium Mjolnir would be an upgrade. Thor would be tossing the OG Mjolnir back to Captain America in return for adamantium Mjolnir. However, Wolverine's adamantium is not proto-adamantium, and while it is strong, it just isn't as strong as the prototype. No pun intended. Alright, now what would be the cons to an adamantium Mjolnir? What is the first thing that comes to mind for you? Anything? Bueller? Odin's enchantment wouldn't be on it, obviously. Arguably, anyone strong enough to lift the hammer based on weight and strength alone would be able to do so. It wouldn't matter if they were worthy or not in spirit, and the hammer could easily fall into the wrong hands if Thor were to lose it, which, due to us even having this conversation, is a distinct possibility. Come on, Thor. Do a pocket check before you leave Asgard so this doesn't happen again. Phone, wallet, keys, Mjolnir. Boom. Now you can go on saving the world or whatever. The next con would be, well, getting the adamantium off of Wolverine's bones. Yeah, I'm not sure how well that'll work out, folks. Unless you were able to get Magneto to rip it out through his pores, which has happened.
I know the smell of your adamantium from a mile away.
Then I don't see how anyone would subdue him long enough to remove his entire skeleton. That would also be extremely messy, and I'm not sure Iron Man has the stomach for that level of brutality. A final downside to this scenario is that adamantium just isn't as strong as the original material that Mjolnir is made out of. Adamantium might be the strongest metal on Earth, but Mjolnir isn't from Earth. Mjolnir is made from a nugget of Uru with a cosmic storm trapped inside. But we will get into the history of Mjolnir more in a bit. Under the right circumstances, the OG Mjolnir could break adamantium. For example, in Avengers Volume 3, number 63, Thor put a dent in Captain America's shield while his hammer was powered by the Odin Force. Now, Cap's shield is made out of an adamantium that is stronger than Wolverine's bones, and you could give credit to the Odin Force for the dent in the shield, but the mere fact that there are scenarios that can amplify Mjolnir enough to damage Captain America's shield means that with enough power or consecutive strikes, OG Mjolnir would be the superior weapon. And now, in order to understand what Mjolnir could be, you need to understand what Mjolnir is. Crack open an Asgardian ale, try not to pass out, and browse through a history of Mjolnir. Mjolnir is made out of Uru, which is a metal from the first moon in existence, so yeah, it's pretty ancient. It was forged using the heat of a dying star and has a strong affinity to magic. So that means not only can it be imbued with different magics and enchantments, but it can also harness magic. It even grows stronger the more magic it is around. If Thor can put Mjolnir in the way of a direct energy blast, that energy can be harnessed and launched back at the enemy. As previously mentioned, a cosmic storm was trapped inside this chunk of Uru before it was forged in Mjnolir. The storm was called the God Tempest and approached Asgard, which led to Odin battling the storm for many days to defend Asgard. The storm was raining a lot more than cats and dogs, I'll tell you that. Finally, when the storm was at its weakest, Odin was able to trap it inside his chunk of Uru like a genie. It took 17 weeks for the Uru to be hot enough to manipulate, and the star power they were harnessing exploded under the stress. It took a little while for Mjolnir to be controlled by anyone since the God Tempest was still alive inside. The hammer wreaked havoc on Asgard as it flew out of control until Odin locked it away in the armory for, well, a really long time. Finally, the God Tempest essentially died, but the hammer retained its mighty power. Odin placed the worthiness enchantment on the hammer, but did you know that the enchantment is so strong that it still works even if Mjolnir were to be cut in half? Thor also has the ability to grant temporary worthiness to anyone he sees fit to wield the hammer. Odin, being the person who casted the enchantment, can also change who can wield the hammer and can make it so that even Thor himself would not be able to pick it up, which is what we saw happen in the original Thor movie, but we all know how that ends up already. Mjolnir is a loyal weapon to its user. They share a strong link that allows the user to call for Mjolnir wherever they may be, even if an entire planet is in the way.
Every time I threw it, it would always come back to me.
If the connection is strong enough, that wouldn't be an issue. I would let a push door that I pulled on stop me from entering a building. So imagine the determination Mjolnir must have to blast through a planet to reach its destination. Lastly, the true Mjolnir gives a variety of pretty sick abilities to whoever wields it. Abilities such as weather manipulation, flight, energy projection, energy sensing, teleportation, and the ability to communicate with any and all races. There are several more, but those are some of the more prominent abilities worth making note of. Obviously, the idea of taking adamantium straight off of Wolverine's bones is criminally insane, but the greater the risk, the greater the reward, you know what I mean? Do you think there would be more pros or cons to an adamantium Mjolnir? Would the God of Thunder be just as intimidating without his original hammer made out of Uru? Let us know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. And thank